Okay, so we'll just give a quick summary of everything we've done so far. So chapter 1 opened with the question of what does it mean to be B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Chapter 2 focused on the word Elokim specifically means Ba'al HaKochos Kulam, that which is the master of all forces. And the word Elohim as a secular word just means things with power or force. So it's the name of Hashem as all things that have power and force connected to its source, that's God. Third chapter, he says, so in that same sense, in a certain sense, being the image of God means also influencing absolutely everything in creation. Being, if you like, the next most powerful thing in the whole of creation. And he spoke about the fact that somehow the way that creation operates is mirrored and parallel to the actions that we do down here. In the fourth chapter, he said, therefore, everybody should never say to themselves, right, what do my actions do? A Jew should never say what do my mitzvahs do or averas do. They can change the whole of the workings of everything. And he said, for example, Titus could only destroy a physical temple, physical Beis HaMikdash and Nebuchadnezzar, but it was already destroyed by our actions, right? So now in the footnote, he puts in the following. We're in the footnote towards the end of the fourth chapter. Have you got it? Has everyone got where we're up to? Mishkan v'Hamikdash, the actual Botei Mikdash. Remember, we said that your heart should be. Yeah, you got the place.
It's number 12 on Safari.
Right, okay.
You're following online, yeah.
On the app, huh?
Yeah.
So the Mikdash and Mishkan, these things are. He's now going to give us a depth as to what they are. That we've hinted at the idea that what goes on in your heart in davening, in praying, is connected to the Holy of Holies, to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Mishkan Mikdash, they connected within them. They became a nexus or nerve point for everything, for all the upper worlds. And remember, we discussed this notion of worlds, that reality exists on multiple planes. All of them are integrated into the physical house of Hashem, the Beis HaMikdash or Mishkan. All the structures of holiness, going all the way up to the highest point. Kol Botov Ginzachov Aliyosov Chadorov Kol Klei HaKodesh. These words literally mean it's inner chambers and upper rooms. Everything, Kulam Hayu B'Dugmas Elyono, were all like a map of the inner world. So every sub-room within the Beis HaMikdash is actually recording. How can I tell if it's recording?
Is there a little red button at the top right corner?
It does say REC, so hopefully it is recording. Okay. So checking we're recording. Yeah. So the physical building of the Beis HaMikdash was a map, right? A physical set of relationships of rooms, chambers, etc. There's actually a map of the dynamics of the spiritual worlds. If you ever see, there's a Siddur of Yaakov Emden. I don't know how much he wrote, how much was added, others, but it takes you through each part of davening, whereabouts you are now walking around in the spiritual worlds, parallel to parts of the Beis HaMikdash.
So the Beis HaMikdash was built to reflect the spiritual parallel.
Yeah. Now, each Beis HaMikdash was slightly different, but there's a fundamental structure to all of them. That fundamental structure is the worlds, and then the more later ones got more and more detail, presumably is like more and more of the micro.
Is the concept of like imagery and like the laying, like architecture, something which enables us as humans to understand concepts, whereas Hashem doesn't need that.
Hashem doesn't need architecture, but we think in space-time, so we translate those spiritual structures into a physical representative form. But it's more than representative, because the Beis HaMikdash could contain intense levels of holiness and access to the presence of Hashem. So rooms presumably then literally contain the holiness to what they're parallel to. Yeah. Let's keep going to what he says. And Kol Klei HaKodesh, every single vessel in the whole temple, Kulam Hayu B'Dugma Elyono, are all representatives of the above. Tselem, Demus, Tavnis, these are three different words for the image and structure. Now, the Ilamas HaKadoshim were the holy worlds. V'Sidrei Pirkei Merkava, and also the structures of the chapters or sections of the Merkava. The Merkava means literally the chariot, but it means the vehicle of God's revelation. It refers to the vision of Yechezkel, of Ezekiel, when he has a vision of the world going up and up and up and up, all the way to what's called the throne of God. And maybe even beyond that, actually. Yastam David Shmuel Araya. They were founded, see, when King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, built the Beis HaMikdash, already the plans had been put in place, David HaMelech himself, King David couldn't build a Beis HaMikdash, right? But he'd done the plans. He had it all ready to go. Hashem says to him, as we read in Divrei Yomim, that you can't do it because you killed people, even though you had to, right? But you can't. It has to be a house of peace, a house of hands without blood. And Shmuel HaNavi also, he calls him Shmuel HaRoya, right? Shmuel the seer. That's the word for a Navi, a prophet. Hakol miyad Hashem aleim hiskil kol melachos hatavnis. This is again in Divrei Yomim, that how they prepared everything. So then Shlomo HaMelech himself went and built it, but it was already fully prepared in advance, prepared with Shmuel HaNavi, one of the greatest of the Nevi'im, of the prophets who ever lived. So that's how they built the plans for the Beis HaMikdash, to map the spiritual worlds. For Amru Zal, and Chazal, the rabbis say, it's a parak in Zvachim, my dichsiv, what does it mean? And he quotes the whole pasuk, how Shmuel, they went and all the stuff. They go to a place called Noyos, which is in Ramah. These are places, right, north of Yerushalayim. They were, Ramah also means heights. So yes, there's a physical place where they were having a meeting called Ramah, but they went there to symbolize that they were going to go to the real Ramah. They were sitting in a place called Ramah, which means heights, a physical height, but they went there to climb a spiritual height. The Rambam has this principle. When Hashem says climb a mountain, so you physically climb a mountain, but you're also climbing the mountain. So they were doing the same thing. They would go to a place called heights because they knew they had to get into a high state of getting to the heights. And they got to Noyo Shalom, the vision of the whole world. That's the name of the other place they're in. So, how are you? So you want to show where we're up to. Upirish Rashi, so Rashi explains him, so Mokum Leveisa Bechira Min HaTorah, to find the source and structure of the temple, of the Beis HaMikdash, inside the Torah itself. Right, that's what he writes in Tanchuma. Shushokol Neged Brias HaOlam. The Medrash also says the Beis HaMikdash is connected, is like the whole creation. So it's like the inner structures of the world, the outer structures of the world, everything is mapped into this building. When the Mishkan, which is a smaller structure than the Beis HaMikdash, there's a lot less detail to it, or different type of detail. So when it's built, B'Tzalel is the main artisan who's in charge of the building. And the pasuk says that Hashem says, I will fill him with the Ruach, with the spirit of God, the divine spirit of Chochmah, Tvuna, and Das, wisdom, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Why those three? Because these are precisely the things that Nivra Olamos, the attributes that God used to create the world. How do we know? Because it says in Mishnah, in Proverbs, Hashem b'chochma, with wisdom, Yasar, it's founded the earth. Koinin Shomayim b'svuna, the heavens with tvuna, with understanding. And B'datus Homus Nikvo, and use knowledge to do the lower realm. So the same three terms, Chochmah, Bina, Das, right? Wisdom, understanding, knowledge. Again, that's the human versions of it. But whatever these are, in the roots of creation, Hashem uses them to create the world. And then Hashem fills those same three attributes into the mind of B'Tzalel to build the Mishkan. So you see the same, what it is that you need to build creation, you need to build the little temple, the little house of Hashem. And again, it's the same principle, that it's a microcosm of all of physical universe, spiritual universes. Everything that exists everywhere is contained in it. So you see, you begin to sense the power of, we can only go nowadays just to the coastal, but what it means to be standing there in that place where when there'll be another building there, you'll have all the spiritual power, all the inner worlds, outer worlds, it's all to be contained there. Eventually, we can go even higher than that. But in the meantime, there's one place on earth where you could touch the holiness of everything in the whole of creation. So, in Zohar, then he quotes a whole bunch of Zohars and places where you could see it, and how that's why the Gemara says, B'Tzalel knew how to fix together the letters that create heaven and earth. And this is another deep principle, that just like in physics, you have a few quarks and leptons, tiny amount, and you put them together in different combinations and you get all of the universe. So too, in the spiritual roots of reality, you have a very small number of things, which include the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And they are roots that as you put them together, combinations and combinations and combinations come out, and the whole, it's like the programming language of creation out of a few of these little things. And that's one of the reasons why There's always a machlokes in the halachos, in the laws of davening. You're not supposed to daven in a language you don't understand, except if it's Hebrew. Because if you speak English, but not French, or you speak French, but not English, and you say the word book, and it doesn't have a meaning in French, it's not that you said something in English, it's that you said nothing at all. It's just a random sound that you don't associate with anything. And therefore it doesn't mean anything. The fact that somebody else would use that sound to associate it with something has nothing to do. You have no relationship with the word, you said nothing. But in Hebrew, it's not the case, because you actually uttered the inner structure of the outer reality. And therefore you said something.
All about intentionality. Right?
So yes, you're right. There are parts of davening where you at least have to have a basic sense of what you're saying. Say Shema, the first bracha of the Shemoneh Esrei. The very minimum you have to be where you're standing before God. And of course, the ideal is to have both Hebrew and intention, right? So yes, a person should definitely strive for both. But I'm saying even in a scenario a person doesn't know, they still are accomplishing something by saying in Hebrew, as long as they understand they're trying to connect to Hashem. Now, we're not saying that's how you should daven, right? But the point is that how could it even possibly be the case? Because the words themselves intrinsically mean things. And therefore, so Bezalel knew how to put together the letters and create, and that was the skill you needed to build a Mishkan. Because what you need when you're building a Mishkan is exactly the same thing that you need to build the universe. That's the power of what's going on over there. So now realize what it means when you daven. Well, let's see. Therefore, ha'adam ma'ama kodesh, somebody who is koidel gamkein kol sidre bereishus sidre merkava klal habriya kula, who has all of this in them. Now, the human being in general has a physical structure that mirrors the inner spiritual dynamics and a spiritual potential that does that. And when we add to that, the Jewish people have taken on the Torah and mitzvahs that are also the map of how to translate all of that. You put all that together, and now what you've got is you got this Dugma Tavnis, the structure of the Mishkan and Mikdash, the whole thing. So first of all, you have a physical body that is a mirror and map of all of this. You've got V'chein Mechalik B'Zayah Klal Tavnis and Mishkan, and there the Zohar HaKadosh goes through and shows how everything in the Mishkan parallels not only parallels the inner spiritual dynamics, but also the structure of the human being. By the way, you can see it yourself. If you go through, and we'll see, he will quote, not right here, but it'll quote a very famous medrash that when it comes to the building of the Mishkan, it says, V'asuli Mikdash. We'll see this soon. V'asuli Mikdash, they shall make for me a holy place. V'shochantis, that I will dwell b'soichom, in them. It doesn't say b'soichoi, in it, singular. There's only one Mishkan. They shall make for me a Mishkan, a dwelling place, singular, so that I may dwell not in it, but b'soichom. And the medrash explains, because the real dwelling place of Hashem can only be in the Mishkan if it's also in the people. This is really the point that I want to bring out here. So that's what's going to be. And so the whole fundamental point of, he says it is this paragraph. In my head it was this paragraph, and I was just looking at it, I couldn't see it, and it's coming up right now. The fundamental aspect of all that's holy in the Mikdash, in the Beis HaMikdash, the presence of God there. Hu ha'adam, the real nexus place for the dwelling of the human being, dwelling of Hashem's presence is the human being. Shem yiskadish atzmei karoi, if a person sanctifies himself properly, b'kiyum hamitzvos kulan, in keeping all the mitzvahs. Shem tuluyim gam kein b'shoshav elyon, where they themselves plug into the highest root. So we put on tefillin, boom, we just lit something up in the inner world. Put tzitzis on, we gave tzedakah to charity day, we came to learn Torah. These things are like just lighting up the universes. That's literally, they are lighting these, they're showing that all these things have their roots in the inner structure of the whole world. And that's what it says in Truma, and here we go, where he says, and literally, you literally become a temple. We, even an individual person, can literally become a house of Hashem's presence. How to do that? By the mitzvahs that we do. But that's what we do. We think mitzvahs are these nice things, you get some reward in the next world. You're literally plugging in, wiring in to the entire flow of God's revelation into the world, and it can flow all the way through the person. So when you see the super great people, the real Gedolim, they're like angels. They're like beyond human, because they are to a large degree. The level of flow of Hashem's revelation is moving in through the person themselves. And it's not inaccessible to us. We may only get it partly or snippets or whatever, but it's happening to us in some level all the time too. Not at that level. You need to,
What does that mean to have Hashem flow through? Like
Hashem's presence. Hashem's not Hashem himself.
Yeah, but how does it manifest in terms that we understand? Is it kind of through more energy, or looking at things through a holy lens, or what does that mean?
It's a great question. And to some degree, some of the remaining chapters, especially towards a little bit later on, it's going to get chapters 12, 13, 14. These places will go in much more detail as to what it actually practically means, how different parts of the soul get transformed by it and so on. But on one level, when we're very in touch with all this stuff, it can impact the way we think. When we're deeply, deeply, deeply in a world of recognizing there's nothing but Hashem on an ultimate level, then it can impact us also psychologically, right? On the psychological level, it can be a place of calm, like the Chovos HaLevavos describes when you have complete trust in Hashem, which we've spoken about in earlier sections. It changes your psyche, it changes the stress, it changes everything. But it also opens us up to almost on a spiritually inspired level, have the soul more active inside us. So our desire to do good goes up. Like when you get into a negative rut, you don't want to do good. When you get into a positive rut, and there's also subconscious and spiritual forces actually operating on the person, and that will lift us even more. So it can become a virtuous cycle of very, very strong growth. That's how we might experience it. But also when we talk to people, there'll be a voice of wisdom that's much stronger. These won't necessarily be things we're always conscious of happening, but they're going to be happening.
It's almost like plugging, we talk about that algorithm that's within the kind of like in the background.
Yeah.
So it's like plugging into the algorithm where it runs through you. And
the way the Nefesh HaChaim describes the relationship between the worlds and us, it's a very good way of thinking about it. Now you have to know, every analogy is flawed somewhere. So here, one of the biggest problems is the system is just God's will. Right? God's will is that it should run according to systems, but nothing is intrinsically, it's not like you could do a trick and say, I know Hashem wants me to do this, but if I do this, I'll plug in somewhere and pull energy down. That's exactly wrong. So that's the only way the analogy is flawed, but in principle, the way he's setting up here is very much in line with the right parts of that analogy.
Is that like an aim that we should be striving for, to get to that state where we're sort of like free-flowing what God...
Yeah, not for its own sake, but because Hashem himself wants us to be there, because that's the state of living a life that's in a relationship with God, living a life that's an agent for Hashem in this world, living a life that's bringing Hashem's light everywhere in the world. And in all probability, if and when we please God get to those sorts of levels, we'll do tremendous good in the world. So it's an iterative process. We're doing good, and then that lifts us into that state. The Rambam describes free will as lasos tov, to do good, v'lichios tzaddik, and become a tzaddik. The converse of that is you can do bad and not just do bad, but become bad. Right? It's not just in a stasis state where you're always good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. No, you actually change who we are. And that's a natural process and a supernatural process and all of these sorts of things. And that's what he says, V'shachanti b'soichom. This is what I was saying earlier, I shall dwell in them. B'soichoi lo nema, it doesn't say in it, ela b'soichom in them. And this is what the Gemara says. This Gemara, the first time you learn this Gemara, is like a shocking Gemara. The Gemara at the beginning of Kesuvos, it says, "Gedolim ma'aseh tzadikim yosim ma'aseh shamayim." The actions of a tzaddik are greater than the creation of heaven and earth. And first time I read that Gemara, I think, what? What do you mean? Come on, the actions of a tzaddik inside heaven and earth. Like one little piece of heaven and earth. What do you mean greater than the acts of heaven and earth? And we prove it. The Gemara proves it. It says, "Ksiv af yodi yesoda." Hashem says, quoting, it's in the Navi and the Prophet Yeshayahu, that my hand singular founded the physical universe and my right hand the heavens. When it comes to actions, the tzaddikim says, Mikdash Hashem koinenu yadecha, the sanctuary of God, which is built by the tzaddikim, your hands, plural, prepared. Right? So, pasub ma'aseh tzaddikim, v'simrayasim b'mikdash, but their beginning proof is talking about the actions of tzaddikim, but it ends up with God's mikdash. So how's that a proof? Maybe we should say Hashem's creation of a mikdash is greater than that. So what's the two? So we say there's two hands used to build a mikdash, but only one hand used to found earth or whatever. Pastor, so what's he say? Ki chen be'emes shel tzadikim al yidei ma'aseim haritzuyim lefonav yisbarach hein heim mikdash Hashem mamash. Tzadikim through their actions are the mikdash. By the way, when we sung those words, crossing the splitting of the sea, didn't have to necessarily be a physical mishkan or mikdash. There had to be a place for God in the world, but the assumption of that moment could have been it was just going to be us. Later, we needed it to actually be centralized in a place. So as God dwells in us, the presence becomes manifest over there. But listen to the power of that. The proof that the work of tzaddikim is greater than the work of creation, because of course, what are the two hands? The hand of God to build the potential, but the tzaddik turns the potential light of God in this world into actual. God builds an incomplete world, and we bring it to perfection. So of course, God is more powerful than anything in creation. Obviously, he could do what a tzaddik does, but he wants us to be the vehicle that completes creation. But when you're completing creation, bringing that light down into a part of the darkness, that is called the mikdash, the mishkan, the place of holiness, the home of God. So it's such powerful things, these such beautiful things. And that's why then you can prove if the building of the mikdash is two-handed process, then that means the actions of the tzaddikim is a two-handed process, which is the second hand of bringing the light of Hashem all the way down to the world where God himself did not put it into, held it back from. Max, you're looking potentially confused. It's actually when you learn this, your face, you can't judge our faces. We're all over the place. It's just such amazing. So
with the tzaddikim, there was mistakes made along the way to make them the tzaddik that they are now.
That's the famous passage. Sheva yipol tzaddik becomes 7 times the tzaddik falls and gets up. So normally you'd say it means a tzaddik, even if they fall 7 times, will keep picking themselves up. I think it's the Baal Shem Tov who says, no. What makes a person a tzaddik is they went through 7 fallings and got up each time. And why the number 7? Because of the 7 midas and attributes and stuff. But so tzaddik, and by the way, even a tzaddik who's achieved this level can still make mistakes. Right? It's not, we never become infallible. But so even if you're flowing with an enormous amount of a channel for an enormous amount of Hashem's revelation in the world and light in the world, it's still possible to make mistakes. We're not at that beyond. And this can explain the pasuk Vasuli Mikdash shall make for me a temple. Kechol asher ani mara oischa chen tasu. Whereas al darshu chen tasu l'doros. The Medrash says, the beautiful Medrash, Vasuli Mikdash, they shall make for me a mikdash, which becomes a mitzvah. So it says in that, the pasuk says, like all that I show you, v'chein tasu, and so they shall do. So Hashem's saying, make me a mishkan, a house of my presence, like all the things I show you, so they shall do. What are those redundant so they shall do words? There the Gemara says, it means kein tasu l'doros, so you shall do in future generations. V'ledarkeinu yesh lomar. What, according to the way we're now learning, we could reveal another part of the facet of Torah. There's one dimension, if it ever breaks, they should rebuild it, or anything that needs repairing, they should do in every generation. But now we can add a deeper level. Don't think now that you've got a building, you've done that job, or fulfilled that mitzvah, because that's never my goal. Yes, the building may house the most intense aspect of my revelation and presence until we're ready to transcend it. But the real goal that I have, says Hashem, in this building, the Mishkan, and all the vessels in it, is only to hint to you, that through it you shall see, and you should do, so you shall make, means so you shall make yourselves. Just like you're making a Mishkan now here as a physical building, in every generation make the Mishkan, because the real energy power of the Mishkan is you being a conduit for God's light. That's the real source of the presence of Hashem in the Mishkan. V'chein tasu, and so you shall make yourselves in every generation. Now, of course, once you've seen that the real house the real house of Hashem is the human, then you reread all the sections where it comes to building the Mishkan, and you suddenly realize, one sec, did he mention rib cages, slice, or same, or it means sides, but we also use it for the rib cage. That creates the confusion when Adam is divided into 2 sides, and we use the translation, some translate the rib cage, but it does use those words. Skin, it goes skin, right? It's like, it's using literally body part language, because it's a metaphor for the human body, which is a metaphor for the human soul, which is a model of the inner workings of all of creation. They're all interrelated. And every generation, we are building the Mishnah. And so it's like we always say, we're building the Beis HaMikdash by our actions, but we're building the Beis HaMikdash because to the extent to which nationally, first as a Jewish people, ultimately all mankind, and in the meantime also every individual, can be an actual house of Hashem. Now there's a limit to how much any individual can fully do it. It has to be done collectively ultimately, but to whatever extent we're doing, it's like we're literally, that's what it means to build bricks in the ultimate structure of what will be,
You said there about kind of as a Jewish collective and then sort of mankind.
Yeah.
Is there a non-Jewish collective?
There is a human collective of all of humanity. It's called Adam. Right? And that word Adam is used ambiguously. There's different words for human. There's Enosh, there is Gever, there's a few words, 4 words altogether. All of them refer to Jews and non-Jews, and 3 out of the 4 take plural, and always when they refer to Jews and non-Jews. The word Adam is very interesting, because it ultimately means Adam in the Garden of Eden, and it's only a singular word. It can never be plural. And therefore, you've got one Gemara that, based on the pasuk in Yechezkel, says, Atem Kriyim Adam. Yisrael right now is Adam, meaning we are living the constitution of the future. That's who we are. And there's another Gemara which says, a non-Jew who works in Torah can be like the greatest Kohen Gadol, also using the word Adam. What's all that mean? It means the ultimate destiny of humanity is to rebuild the oneness of Adam. We're going to get there in later chapters here in Nefesh HaChaim. Right now, the Jewish people have taken on themselves to try to live that to the maximum right now. We're kind of living as part of Adam. And we will become this thing called Yisrael, which is another name of Adam, as a structure that will achieve the first dimension of perfection and then be able to bring the whole of the rest of humanity along with. They're also playing roles, right? Non-Jews who keep the 7 Noachide laws can have a portion of the world to come already now. And they're building, if you like, the world as a vessel to receive the light. Our job is to bring that light in. Eventually, that will all become part of this one thing. And eventually, the separate identity of nations will disappear and it becomes one gigantic structure that will either have the name Yisrael or Adam or both of them. That's what it means. But so right now, the primary responsibility for doing this rests with us. This will, we've got to take, and that, by the way, is something very deep. When we see problems in the world, although we don't want to blame ourselves, we still have to feel a responsibility for turning the world into the place that house God's glory. That's why, even though anti-Semitism always involves unfair criticism of Jews and absurd levels of criticism and ridiculous stuff, nevertheless, whilst we have to very strongly fight against it, we also have to absorb that on the level they're not aware of, there is a truth to the fact that the world shouldn't be this mess. And, behind all their conspiracy theories, the Jews are actively driving the world, there's a subconscious level at which they might be even generating this into their conscious mind and then warping it. But there's a subconscious level at which we do have a responsibility for the whole world, right? And that is essentially what he's trying to tell us over here. Yes, we're not the only ones, but we have, if you like, the primary one to bring that house of God into the world right now, that we have to feel the full responsibility for that.
How does not having a Beis HaMikdash now affect us building our inner
Beis HaMikdash is an excellent question. So if we fully built our inner Beis HaMikdash, our inner house of God right now, then there would be an outer one already. So, and having an outer one it makes it, it's an iterative process. Once you've got it there, it makes it a bit easier and so on, and it iterates upwards. So we can do as individuals to some degree, but the project was never an individual project of people having private Beis HaMikdashes. It was always a national project. And that's why when we daven, we try to daven as a community. We daven in the plural, at least the siddur. We can talk to Hashem individually whenever you want to, in whatever language you want. But the work of taking the siddur and davening is always about Yisrael. Sometimes, like on Rosh Hashanah, we daven for the whole of humanity. Sometimes we do that too. But as a general thing, we're trying to be mouthpieces, not for ourselves as an individual, but for the entire thing called Yisrael. So on Rosh Hashanah, we'll do it for the whole world, right, as well. But generally, V'rofei chole amo Yisrael. Right, we're talking about, don't just heal somebody ill. Heal the whole of Yisrael, and bring the whole of Yisrael to this, and the whole of Yisrael to that. Again, there are certain brachos that refer wide in the Yisrael, but for the most part, we are. So the level of organization, the multiple levels of possible consciousness, that's the one we're plugging into when we're doing the davening. Yeah.
If we are the houses of Hashem, then we're supposed to bring the world to completion. what is the need for the physical house of Hashem?
Oh, great question. Because we are separated individuals. On some level, we're all connected as one, and on some level, we operate individuated. The house of Hashem exists when, if you like, the collective soul, first, again, Yisrael and ultimately humanity, there is already an aspect in which the Beis HaMikdash serves both purposes. Because we say, Ki beisi beis tefillah yikari lechol ha'amim. The Pasuk says that my house, says God, will be a house for all the nations of the world. And Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, specifically davens, there shouldn't just be a place where we Jewish people can come and serve Hashem, where all of humanity can. But ultimately, that second phase will come later, where in a deeper way. In the first phase, it's us who are supposed to be there. So, but at whichever phase we're at, it's the real house of Hashem is the oneness point. And since we're not physically jammed into one body, this becomes like the body of us collectively, which is why everybody had to contribute something into it.
Right.
So that it's all of us as one. Like ultimately, we would like our whole mind, us to create a super conscious state where we all, whilst we'll have an individual consciousness, in the world to come in Olam Haba, there'll also be a collective consciousness that will also plug into a super conscious state that will eventually resurrect the whole of Adam, which is the whole of humanity in the Garden of Eden. Garden of Eden will be a state of mind, right? And that will be something that we'll eventually be able to plug into and connect to.
It's interesting because in our previous conversations, there are some people that say that there's two ways that we can bring back the Mashiach, either through us being the complete, unity and being our purest best selves. But then on the other hand, it's like there is an opinion that we could be at our very lowest, that we need to be saved in order to then Mashiach to come and intervene and us, get the breath that we got back.
Absolutely. The Gemara says it's going to either come through this or through either because we're at the top or the bottom. It's true. But both pathways have something in common. They both have teshuvah process by us. One, we generate it completely autonomously within ourselves. The other is we're pressed into a corner where you have all these frightening prophecies, frightening nevuahs of what could be, and Gog and Magog, the whole terrible stuff. But the goal of that process is to crush us to the point where there awakens within us a latent inner yearning for Hashem, just like happened in Egypt. And that jolts. It may be individuals are lost in that process, but something collectively rises up. So Hashem says that no matter what happens, every pathway will lead there. There's a more painful possible pathway if you don't make it of your own merit beforehand, but it will come through your merit. Just I can force you to realize, to bring out the deep parts of yourself, or you can bring out those deep parts yourself. Okay, so let's try just to finish this, and then next time we're ready to start the 5th chapter. Okay, I think most weeks we should hopefully be able to pull off one chapter, but it's worth taking time on this. The principle, when he diverts with a footnote, it's worth knowing. It's just the linear flow of the primary messages of the text don't need it. But it paints such a powerful picture, it adds so much that's why he puts them here. Right? It's like these could just become sforim by themselves, like they could be books of their own. These are just beautiful. Okay, so, and the Chainama who Yisbarach Shemai. Is this where we're up to? I think, yeah. Tachlis Gemara says the goal of everything is Shekein Tachzat Melech should do. So the Chainama who Yisbarach Shlomo, Hashem himself said to Shlomo Melech, Ach Gemar Binyan Mikdash in Melachim Aleph after Shlomo Melech built the Beis HaMikdash, Hashem says to him, Abayis Hazeh Ashat Abayna, this house you've now built, and he carries on, he says, it's only im telech b'chukoisai, only if you go in my ways. And then the conclusion is, V'shochanti b'seich am Yisrael, I will dwell amongst my people Yisrael. Now, of course, one level is, I'll dwell here, which is amongst my people Yisrael. But what he's really saying, he says, Daika, listen, I'm dwelling in the people. Again, the Beis HaMikdash becomes a place where we can share the consciousness, where we can have it collective together. That's what it is. But that's true. But so it's physical single place might be right over here, but it is a living consciousness of Israel. And again, as we saw earlier, ultimately it will be even beyond that too. So when the Jewish people messed up their inner place of God, that's why then the physical outer manifestation can't be there. It is literally powered by the collective oneness and collective spirituality, collective godliness of us. And if we wreck that and damage that, it can't stay. Now it invites any evil in the world to come and destroy it. It wrecks its very foundations the merciful one should save us. This is exactly what Hashem said to the prophet, to the Navi Yechezkel. Haggai des Beis Yisrael, tell the house of Israel, as a bias, the house be kolmu ma'avonosem. Right, it's going to be what's going to happen with that because their sins. V'imnichnu kol asher asu tzuras habayis tchunas moitzav mevoyel v'chol tzureso chol chukoso chol tzureso chol teroisov haida oisam chsoiv leinehem. Let them know all the stuff. Yishmus kol tzureso v'chol chukoso v'asu oisam. They have to keep. This is when they have the vision of they stop their sins, and if they do, then the whole surah, the whole vision of the house that he was shown, all its details, everything, its entry, its structures, its laws, its everything about it, that's what they'll be able to build. In other words, but you have to stop doing the Averas to do that. In the Targum there goes, then surah etc. That's it. So that's what we wanted to do today. And see this incredibly beautiful, it's absolutely amazing. Because again, you can be sitting in your room somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you choose to daven at that moment. Or you choose to reach, or you see somebody suffering somewhere, you go and choose to do something. At that moment, there's something flickering into the world that will eventually become this house of God. Now, Hashem's dwelling, even though I can't dwell fully in the Beis HaMikdash, but to whatever extent he can dwell and enter into this world is through us. And that's the shocking but beautiful. Yeah. And so now we're ready to move on next time to Hashem, where he's going to ask the question, he's going to open, what was it that made Hashem want to do this? Put all this power into upper, lower worlds, right down here into this world, into the human mind, into the human being. What's going on with all this? But we will see. And from here, we'll start to open up many more dimensions to all this.